In the dim corridors of the human soul, there lies a strange paradox, one that philosophers whisper about, but few dare to explore. It is the moment where pain transforms into passion, and rejection curiously sharpens the very edges of desire. Why is it that when we are denied, we long harder? Why is it that what slips away becomes sacred? What Jung uncovered was not just psychological. It was mythic. It was ancient. It was the dark pulse that beats beneath our most hidden longing. We believe we want what is good for us. We think we are guided by logic, by compatibility, by love. But the truth is far more disturbing. Our psyche is a labyrinth, and rejection becomes not a wall but a signal, an invitation to the forbidden chamber within. The moment we are denied, something deep inside awakens an unconscious fire, drawn not to wholeness, but to what is missing. And what is missing, the soul turns into a god. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unaccepted, the unloved, the banished parts of our being. When someone rejects us, it is not merely their absence that stings. It is the confrontation with our own unloved self, with the ghost of our unmet desires. And instead of walking away, we worship the wound. We return to it again and again, as if it held a key to something more than the person who hurt us. It becomes symbolic, it becomes archetypal, it becomes divine. And so the question lingers like smoke in the air: what if rejection is not your enemy? What if it is your unconscious trying to awaken you? Not to win them back, but to meet yourself. This is the silent cry that Carl Jung heard beneath the surface of our desire, the echo of the soul calling not to possess but to realize. And until we confront it, we remain prisoners. Not of the person who left us, but of the image we built from their absence. This is not psychology as you know it. This is a journey into your own darkness, and what you may find there might change everything. What happens in the soul when it is denied what it longs for? The world of reason offers simple answers. It speaks of hormones, attachment styles, and wounds from childhood. But the soul does not traffic in simplicity. The soul seeks meaning, not mechanics. And to the soul, absence is not a void, it is a symbol, a crucible, a sacred fire. Carl Jung taught that the psyche responds to absence not by forgetting, but by mythologizing. The one who walks away becomes more than a person. They become an image of longing itself. And that image, sculpted by memory, polished by fantasy, becomes far more powerful than the real. They become the embodiment of the missing part of us. And so, we chase not them, but the symbol they have awakened within us. This is not desire, it is projection. We do not see them as they are, we see what we lack, and we drape that emptiness upon their form as if it were silk. Jung warned us of this illusion that the one who rejects us becomes a mirror, not of who they are, but of who we are not yet. Rejection uncovers the unlived life, the unexplored path, the self we buried. And in this unveiling, desire is born. It is not their smile we crave, it is the self we glimpse through their eyes. Here lies the alchemy. Rejection reveals archetype of longing, and longing, when misunderstood, becomes obsession. But when understood, it becomes initiation. For it is through this wound, through this emptiness, that the psyche calls us to grow, not outward, but inward. We are not meant to conquer the one who denied us. We are meant to confront the part of ourselves that still believes we are unworthy of being chosen. Rejection is the door. Desire is the key. But the treasure lies not in winning them back. It lies in becoming whole. And yet most never reach this treasure. They chase ghosts. They cling to fantasy. They confuse hunger with love. And in doing so, they fall into a deeper bondage. The bondage of their own unacknowledged shadow. Only those willing to look into the mirror, to see what the rejection truly reflects, can begin the journey home. There is a strange phenomenon within the soul. That which we hide from becomes that which pursues us. That which we deny becomes that which dominates our fate. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not evil, but hidden, not malevolent, but misunderstood. And in the realm of rejection, the shadow finds its voice. When we are rejected, it is not just pain that rises, it is exposure. Suddenly, all the parts of ourselves we thought we buried resurface. The feeling of being unwanted stirs ancient fears of inadequacy, of invisibility, of not being enough. But these feelings are not new. They are old gods, long exiled, and rejection is their resurrection. The desire we feel for the one who turns away is not rooted in love, it is rooted in confrontation. They have unknowingly summoned our shadow. And now we chase them, not because they are worthy of being chased, but because they carry the symbolic key to the locked door within us. We want what we cannot have, not because it is good for us, but because it matches the unspoken narrative of our wound. The girl who ignores the boy does not just reject him. She reflects his belief that love must be earned. The man who withdraws from the woman does not just disappear. He awakens her fear that connection is always temporary. The shadow projects itself onto others and then begs for healing through their approval. But this is a deception. We are not chasing the person. We are chasing the feeling of wholeness that we believe their presence will bring. Yet Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Rejection is not fate. It is not the end. It is a flare, a signal, a message from the depths. It is not about them, it is about you. And until you stop seeking healing from those who hurt you, you will continue to dance with ghosts. The shadow is not to be avoided, it is to be integrated. The desire born from rejection is not to be indulged, it is to be examined. Only then does the illusion dissolve. Only then do we stop turning rejection into religion. And only then do we begin to truly desire, not from lack, but from presence. There is something almost sacred in the way we remember those who reject us. Memory does not record them as they were, it sanctifies them. It builds altars in their absence. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they become myth. We no longer recall their imperfections. We forget the silence, the withdrawal, the indifference. What remains is a distilled version of the person, crafted not by truth but by longing. The one who left becomes the one who could have saved us. This is not love. This is idolatry. Jung saw this clearly. He understood that when a wound is not healed, it becomes a god. And we worship the pain, not because it is beautiful, but because it feels like the only part of us still alive. We bow before the memory, hoping it will love us this time. We replay conversations as if by remembering perfectly we can change the past. But this too is an illusion. When we idolize the one who rejected us, we trap ourselves in the realm of the symbolic. They are no longer a person, they are an archetype. They are not them. They are our father who never saw us, our mother who never embraced us, the friend who turned away, the teacher who overlooked our hand. They become the stage upon which our ancient drama unfolds. And so, we do not desire them. We desire resolution. We desire to be seen, chosen, redeemed, not by the one who left, but by the one we were never allowed to become. Rejection, then, is not about the other person. It is about the story we told ourselves long before they arrived. The story of being almost love, almost enough, almost worthy. Until that story is rewritten, every new rejection will feel like an echo of the first. Every new desire will be haunted by old ghosts, and the idols will keep changing faces but never names. To break the spell, we must look beyond the myth. We must ask not, why did they leave? But, why does this wound feel like home? Only then do we stop worshiping the pain. Only then do we start meeting ourselves. There exists within each of us an unlived self, a version of who we could have become had we not been shaped by fear, rejection, expectation, and compromise. It is this phantom self, hidden beneath layers of social masks, that whispers to us when we are alone. And when rejection strikes, it is this self that stirs. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious seeks wholeness. But wholeness is not comfort, it is confrontation. And often, it uses desire as its compass, pointing not toward what we need, but toward what we lack. The one we crave after rejection often carries the projection of this unlived self. They awaken not only our longing for union, but our longing for the parts of us that we silence to survive. They are bold where we are hesitant, free where we are shackled. They laugh with the abandon we abandoned. And so, our attraction to them is rarely about who they are. It is about what they represent. They are a mirror, reflecting the parts of ourselves we never dared to live. Desire, in this sense, becomes a cry for integration. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most never embark on this journey. They chase people instead of essence. They chase validation instead of transformation. They seek in others what they refuse to give to themselves. This is why the pain of rejection cuts so deeply. It is not just the person we lose, it is the possibility they awakened. The possibility the more whole, more courageous, more expressive self. And instead of becoming that self, we try to possess the person. We confuse awakening with attachment. But the psyche cannot be tricked. It will not rest until it becomes it was meant to be. Rejection, then, is not a detour, it is a doorway. A call to embody the very energy we once projected onto someone else. The desire is not wrong, it is misdirected. It is not telling us to go after them. It is telling us to go after ourselves, to finally live the life that we buried beneath duty, fear, or shame. The one who left may never return, but what they awakened in you can stay, if you are willing to become the person you were trying to find. There is a truth Jung knew well, one that most souls never wish to hear. We do not fall in love with others. We fall in love with our own projections. This is the hidden engine behind so much of our suffering. We see not the person, but the part of ourselves we seek to complete. When rejection pieces us, it feels personal, cruel, even unjust. But in the depths of Jungian thought, we come to see that much of this pain is rooted in a confusion of vision. The one who turned away did not break something within us. They simply revealed what was already broken. The projection shattered, and with it, the illusion. What we call attraction is often projection in disguise, a transference of unconscious material from within our psyche onto the image of another. And when that image does not respond with equal reverence, when it rejects us, it is not love we lose. It is our own illusion crumbling to dust. This is why rejection stings so bitterly it tears down a cathedral we built in their image. But that cathedral was never about them. It was a house of mirrors, walls covered in the reflections of who we long to be, what we long to feel, and the harmony we never experienced. Jung called this process the anima and animus projection, the inner feminine and masculine archetypes that live within each of us, projected outward onto people who seem to match their silhouette. We see the muse, the savior, the forbidden, and we chase them with urgency, believing they are the answer. But they are only a signpost. They point us toward the work we must do within. To see someone clearly is rare. Most never get there. We are too busy seeing ourselves, our fears, our hopes, our unmet longings. And this is why rejection is so powerful. It stops the projection. It disrupts the fantasy. It demands that we see not only the other as they are, but also ourselves in all our wounded complexity. To suffer rejection consciously is to awaken. It is to feel the ache without running, to witness the illusion without escaping, to ask, what part of me did I try to love through them? For only then can desire become real, not projection, not hunger, but presence. Long before psychology had a name, long before Carl Jung put pen to paper, ancient myths whispered the same story, the story of the lost lover. It is the tale of Orpheus descending into the underworld for Eurydice, of Psyche seeking her divine beloved, of the soul yearning for that which has departed. Rejection, in this context, is not merely modern heartache. It is archetypal, woven into the very pattern of the human condition. Jung saw this clearly. He taught that within each of us lives a vast collection of archetypes, timeless patterns that shape our emotions, our longings, and one of the most potent is that of the lost beloved. When someone leaves us or refuses to return our affection, we do not simply miss a person, we awaken a myth, a psychic script older than memory, deeper than flesh. Suddenly, we are not ourselves. We are the hero or heroine in the great romantic tragedy of the soul, the one who was left behind, the one who now suffers beautifully, the one whose pain is sacred, and in that sacredness, desire is reborn, not as attraction, but as destiny. We no longer want the person, we need them to fulfill the myth we have unconsciously activated. This is why rejection can feel like death, not because the person was our salvation, but because they have become the symbolic centerpiece of a story we now believe we must complete. The psyche clings not to love, but to narrative, not to connection, but to resolution. But what if this myth is not meant to be fulfilled by their return? What if the descent into the underworld is not about retrieving them, but about retrieving ourselves? In every myth, the journey begins with loss, and from that loss comes initiation. Pain becomes passage. Rejection becomes rebirth. The one who left is not the end of the story, but the beginning of transformation. They are the catalyst, not the conclusion. The ancient myths were never about external union. They were about inner integration. Jung reminded us we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life, and perhaps the one who rejected us was simply one such disguise, sent not to complete us, but to awaken us. There is a strange truth about the human mind: what is unresolved becomes unforgettable. The psyche clings to what it cannot finish. It circles the unanswered, returns to the unresolved, and obsesses over the incomplete. And in the realm of desire, nothing is more magnetic than rejection. Carl Jung understood that the unconscious mind seeks not merely pleasure or satisfaction, but wholeness. And paradoxically, it often finds wholeness through pain. The rejection that wounds us becomes the thread that ties us back to the deepest part of ourselves. Not because it brings clarity, but because it withholds it. The one who rejects us becomes a question without an answer, a song without an ending, a book with the last page torn out. And so we return to them not out of love, but out of unfinishedness. The mind, starved of resolution, builds temples to what could have been, and from those temples we pray, not to the person, but to the closure we never received. This is the seductive power of incompletion. The rejected becomes the imagined, the real becomes the ideal, and in our solitude, we carve statues of longing from the stone of silence. We say, if only, and in those two words, we breathe life into ghosts. But this longing is not a flaw, it is a function. The psyche does not suffer because it is weak. It suffers because it is trying to integrate what was left behind. And until we confront this need for completion, we will remain entangled in stories that are not ours to finish. Jung warned of this tendency. He taught that projection, left unchecked, turns the human heart into a graveyard of unfinished selves. The people we chase after rejection are rarely the ones we truly want. They are the ones we believe can return us to the self we once abandoned. And so, the true act of healing is not closure from the other. It is closure from within, not understanding why they left, but understanding what part of us still longs to be chosen. For once that part is embraced, the desire dissolves, the spell breaks, and the rejected idol returns to human form. We must dare to end the story ourselves, to place the final word where none was given, to walk away not in bitterness but in authorship. For the one who completes themselves is never haunted by those who could not. There is a quiet desperation that hides beneath most human desire, the yearning not simply to be loved, but to be validated, to be seen, heard, affirmed, to have someone's yes become a seal of our worth. And when that yes is withheld, when rejection speaks instead, the soul trembles. Jung observed that when our early needs for love, acceptance, and affirmation go unmet, we carry the wound into adulthood like a sacred relic. We present it to the world in every relationship, silently asking, "Do I matter now?" We call it romance. We call it chemistry. But at its core, it is often a plea for identity, a yearning to exist more fully through the eyes of another. And when that other turns away, the pain is not simply loss. It is annihilation, a collapse of selfhood, because the one we desired held the power to confirm us, to tell us we are enough. And when they did not, we were left suspended in uncertainty. But this is not love, this is tyranny, not theirs but our own. The tyranny of needing another to validate our existence. The tyranny of defining our worth through another's attention. This is not a failure of emotion. It is a failure of integration. We have outsourced the voice of our inner truth. We have handed the mirror of our soul to someone who does not wish to hold it. And so, rejection does not just sting, it devastates. Because it feels like the final verdict, you are not worthy. But Jung would ask, whose voice is that really? Is it the person who walked away? Or is it the voice of our childhood echoing through their silence? Until we reclaim the power to name ourselves, to affirm our own being, we will remain enslaved by the gaze of others. The desire that follows rejection is not desire, it is dependency. It is the unconscious trying to resolve an ancient need with a modern figure. But no one can love you into wholeness. No one can affirm what you have not yet embraced. The moment you stop needing validation is the moment rejection loses its grip. You no longer chase the one who left because you are no longer asking them to complete you. You walk away, not to escape, but because you now carry within you what you once begged to receive. And in that quiet sovereignty, true desire is born, not as a plea but as a choice, not from hunger but from fullness. Pain, when understood, is not punishment, it is purification. It is not cruelty, it is calling. And rejection, though cloaked in loss, is often the beginning of something far greater than the relationship that ended. It is an initiation into the depths of the soul. Carl Jung believed that transformation does not come from comfort. It comes from crisis. From the shattering of old illusions, from the crumbling of personas we clung to for safety. Rejection, when received consciously, does just that. It tears down the mask we used to win love, and in the wreckage it reveals something terrifying and true to ourselves. We often believe we know who we are, but it is only when love is withheld, when the mirror of affirmation is shattered, that we see what remains beneath the performance. The pain of rejection reveals our false self, the self that needed to be wanted, the self that compromised truth for connection, the self that measured worth in attention. And as each of these falls away, what remains is raw, unshaped, and sacred. It is the authentic soul not yet formed but ready to emerge. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And this is what rejection offers, not a verdict on your value, but an opportunity to awaken to what you have forgotten. That your value does not lie in being chosen. It lies in being whole. In ancient rites of passage, pain marked the transition from boy to man, from girl to woman. The soul was stripped, tested, burned, and forged. So too does rejection burn away what is false. It initiates us into our deeper identity, not the one we show to win love, but the one that exists even when no one is watching. This is the quiet power hidden in the pain. Not bitterness, not self-pity, but birth. The birth of a self that no longer begs for belonging. And when you emerge from this crucible, you no longer see the one who rejected you as an enemy. You see them as the gatekeeper, the one whose no opened the door to your yes, the one who pushed you inward where the true work begins. Rejection, then, is not the end. It is the soul's whisper. Now you are ready. There comes a moment, After the silence, after the ache, after the dreams of reconciliation fade, when we must walk alone. Not because solitude is desirable, but because it is necessary. Jung understood this as part of what he called the individuation process, the soul's gradual awakening to its own truth, separate from the demands and affections of others. Rejection at its deepest level initiates this journey. For as long as we depend on the presence of another to feel whole, we live in bondage. We dress it in beauty, romance, devotion, longing, but beneath it all lies fear of being alone with ourselves. But to become who we truly are, we must pass through this fear, not by escaping it with new distractions, but by turning inward and remaining present with what we find there. This is the essence of the hero's solitude, the inner pilgrimage. It is not glamorous. It is not adorned with applause or attention. It is silent, often brutal, always transformative. Because here the illusions fall away. Here the fantasies we clung to unravel. And we begin to see, perhaps for the first time, not who they were, but who we are becoming. The road without their hand is not empty. It is sacred. It is the path where the psyche begins to gather what it once scattered. The parts of ourselves we gave away for love, for belonging, for acceptance, all now return. And though the nights feel longer and the days sometimes hollow, there is something being built in that stillness, inner substance. Integrity, self-respect. The solitude that follows rejection is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the cocoon before rebirth. It is where we stop chasing echoes and begin listening to the quiet voice that has waited patiently beneath the noise. The voice that says, "You are enough," not because they stayed, but because you remained. And when you can walk without reaching for their shadow, when your worth no longer sways with their attention, when your silence feels like a sanctuary, not a sentence, then the journey has turned. Then you have become not the rejected, but the realized. The ego is a fragile construct. It clings to roles, titles, identities, and especially to the illusion of control. Rejection strikes at its very core. It does not merely bruise the ego, it threatens to unravel it. And this, Carl Jung understood, is where transformation truly begins. We are taught to strengthen the ego, to build it, polish it, defend it. But the soul seeks something more ancient, more enduring, the self. And the path to the self requires the breaking of the false. Rejection becomes one of the ego's greatest adversaries, for it denies it the illusion that it is lovable as it pretends to be. It unmasks us. The collapse of the ego following rejection is not a failure. It is a sacred disintegration. It is the storm that clears the path. The earthquake that shakes the foundation. The fire that burns the house we built in someone else's gaze. In that collapse, something deeper is revealed, a self not dependent on approval, not addicted to affirmation, not constructed by external validation. A self that exists even in silence, even in abandonment. Jung described the encounter with the self as an experience of both terror and revelation. We resist it because it requires death, the death of the identity we created to be loved. But this death is not the end. It is a return, a remembering of who we were before we thought we had to earn our place in someone's world. This is why rejection wounds the ego so deeply, because the ego had a plan. It had an image, a timeline, a fantasy of fulfillment, and rejection tears it all away. But beneath that image, beneath that timeline, waits something more resilient, the soul untouched by the refusal of others. To experience the ego's collapse without despairing is to become unshakable. You are no longer the rejected, you are the awakened. Not defined by what was denied, but redefined by what you've now seen. That your worth was never granted by their acceptance. It simply was. And in that realization you are free, not from pain, but from illusion. For the one who has died in this way begins to live, not from fear, but from truth. Not from desire, but from clarity. To walk through the fire of rejection and emerge whole, not to erase the pain, it is to integrate it. For the pain itself holds knowledge. And Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the dance of shadow and light, the meeting of the wounded and the whole, the rejected and the realized. It is not about overcoming desire. It is about understanding where it comes from, what it points to, and how it reveals the parts of ourselves we have not yet claimed. Every desire born of rejection is a map. It leads us toward the unloved within. That timid child who once asked, "Am I enough?" and was answered with silence. That silenced voice that learned to perform to be accepted. That part of the soul that still waits for someone else's approval to feel alive. But the light does not come through external affection. It comes when we turn inward and offer that part of us something no one else can: compassion without condition. Presence without persuasion. Acceptance without needing to be accepted first. This is shadow work, not as mystical abstraction, but as radical self-honesty. The one who rejected you may never return. They may never apologize, never explain, never see you as you wanted to be seen. But their role in your life is not meaningless. They served as a mirror, a painful, imperfect, vital mirror. And through them, you saw the outline of the part of yourself you have ignored. You desired their attention, but what you truly needed was your own. And when you embrace the unloved within, something shifts. You no longer seek to be chosen. You choose yourself. You no longer ache for their gaze. You meet your own eyes with reverence. The shadow once feared now becomes your guide. There is no return to innocence after this integration. But there is stillness. There is freedom. Desire no longer pulls you from your center. It becomes a signal, not a chain. And rejection no longer wounds you. Because you now understand, it was never about them. It was always the soul's way of asking, will you return to me? We crave endings. We crave explanation, resolution, the clean symmetry of understanding. We long for closure as if it were a sacred right, something owed to us by those who walked away. But Carl Jung knew a deeper truth: life does not grant closure, it grants awareness. And often, the only ending we receive is the one we create within. Rejection almost never ends with clarity. The other person leaves, withdraws, avoids, or simply stops choosing us. We are left with the silence, the open wound, the unfinished page. And in that space, the mind writes its own narrative. If only I had done more, if only they had seen me, if only they understood. But the truth is simple, if painful. Most of what we long to hear from them is not theirs to say. It is ours. It is not their responsibility to name your worth, to explain their withdrawal, or to justify your suffering. That desire, though understandable, keeps you tethered. It postpones your healing. It places your peace in the hands of someone who has already chosen not to carry it. Closure in the Jungian sense is not a conversation. It is an inner completion. It is the moment when you stop needing the story to end your way. When you allow the wound to exist without being sealed by someone else's words. When you let silence be the answer, not because it satisfies, but because it frees. This is the maturity that pain demands, not bitterness, but boundaries, not retribution, but release. To close the door without slamming it, to walk away without waiting for the final word, to bless what was, even if it ended in silence. The soul does not need explanations, it needs integration, but asks, what did I learn? What part of me was revealed? What truth am I now able to see? These are the questions that lead not to answers, but to growth. You may never know why they chose to leave, but you can know why you choose to stay with yourself. And in that choice, rejection no longer defines you, it refines you. Desire in its unconscious form is a fire without direction. It burns through us with urgency, pulling us toward those who mirror our hidden wounds. But desire, when purified, when brought into the light of awareness, becomes something else entirely. It becomes clarity. Jung saw the evolution of desire not as its suppression, but as its transformation. He believed that what we long for most intensely often hides a deeper longing beneath. When we want someone who rejects us, it is not the physical presence that binds us. It is the meaning we attach to that presence. We desire what we believe they represent: worth, visibility, love, completion. But once the illusion is shattered, we stand in a strange emptiness. The image fades, the fantasy dissolves, and what remains is the raw truth of the self, longing not for a person, but for union with its own essence. This is the sacred shift. The moment you no longer want to possess them. The moment you no longer dream of proving your worth. The moment you see clearly that the desire was never truly about them at all. You begin to discern the difference between obsession and insight, between hunger and recognition. The ones who reject us become, strangely, our teachers. Not because they meant to teach, but because they showed us where we were still lost. Jung often wrote of the alchemical process, the transformation of base material into gold. Rejection is part of that alchemy. The base desire is the attachment. The gold is the insight. But only those willing to endure the heat of inner fire will find that their longing was always pointing inward. To move from desire to clarity is to regain your vision. You no longer stumble in pursuit of a fading shadow. You see with painful honesty the illusion you once called love. And in seeing it, you are free to love again. This time from your wholeness, not from your hunger. This is the final test of transformation. Can you hold desire without chasing it? Can you bless what you once craved and let it pass through you like wind through open hands? For when clarity replaces craving, you are no longer defined by who stayed or who left. You are defined by who you became in their absence. There is a moment subtle and silent when you wake up and realize you are no longer chasing. Not them, not closure, not explanation. The yearning softens, the fantasies loosen their grip, and in the stillness, something powerful takes root: sovereignty. This is what Carl Jung pointed toward in the individuation process, the integration of the unconscious into conscious wholeness. Not perfection, not purity, but completeness. And in that completeness, the need to be chosen by another fades, because you have chosen yourself. Rejection once seemed like a wound you could not stop touching, rehearsing, explaining. It defined your nights, invaded your thoughts, and hollowed your confidence. You believed that their absence meant something essential about you. You believed that if you could make them return, you could finally feel real. But now you begin to see it was never about them. It was always about the power you gave away. You once believed that desire was a force outside of you, something triggered by their presence, something they could grant or deny. But desire, in its truest form, does not belong to another. It is yours. It arises from your depths, not to bind you to someone else, but to reveal what still lives within you unexpressed. This is what the sovereign self knows, but the ones who reject you cannot take what was never theirs to hold. Your worth, your depth, your path. These were never contingent upon their recognition. They were simply obscured beneath the layers of needing to be needed. And now, you see clearly. You no longer dream of winning them back. You no longer perform in hopes of being seen. You no longer beg the gods of memory to rewrite the past. You walk forward, not because you have hardened, but because you have softened toward yourself. And in that softness, in that inner embrace, desire returns. But this time it is not hungry, it is not desperate, it is free. You want not to fill an emptiness, but to express a fullness. You love not to be completed, but to overflow. This is the arrival of the sovereign self, whole, wounded, worthy, and finally at peace. What happens when you no longer seek approval to feel alive? When desire no longer demands, no longer pleads, but simply is, a gentle wind within you, not a storm that controls you. This is the return to wholeness that Carl Jung envisioned, a state where the opposites within you no longer fight for dominance, but dance in harmony, the inner masculine and feminine, the shadow and the light, the wound and the wisdom. This is not a romantic fantasy. It is an inner fact. It is the psychological homecoming that every soul secretly longs for. In the early stages of rejection, desire felt like fire, wild, urgent, devouring. You believed it was about them. But now you see it was always about something much deeper, something sacred. The yearning to reclaim yourself. To desire without dependence is to love freely. Not because you need them to validate your existence, but because your existence already stands complete. The one who comes into your life, no one who carries your salvation on their shoulders. They are not a mirror for your worth. They are a companion to your already fulfilled self. This shift is quiet. There is no celebration, no announcement, just a calm within, a breath not held in anxiety, but released in peace. You feel attraction, but it no longer owns you. You experience longing, but it no longer defines you. You may still remember the one who rejected you, but now they are no longer a god, no longer an anchor, no longer the gatekeeper of your joy. They were a messenger, and the message has been received. Jung would say you have integrated the projection. You have retrieved the soul fragment once placed in their hands, and now you are no longer fragmented. You are no longer waiting to be made whole. Desire returns to its rightful place, not as desperation, but as creativity, as passion, as presence. The soul no longer searches for someone to heal it. It becomes the source of its own healing. And in that sacred return, you reclaim the greatest freedom of all, the ability to love without losing yourself, the ability to want without needing, the ability to desire, not from a place of emptiness, but from the fullness of a soul that finally came home. There is a quiet truth hidden in the teachings of Carl Jung, one that echoes through every wound we carry. The wound is where the light enters. Rejection, though brutal in its moment, often becomes the birthplace of the soul's greatest wisdom. What once felt like a fracture becomes a threshold, a sacred wound that opens the door to transformation. In the early pain of rejection, all feels hollow. The world becomes muted, the heart becomes tender, and the mind returns again and again to what might have been. But over time, something deeper begins to emerge. If you listen closely, not to the noise of longing, but to the silence beneath it, you begin to hear it a call not to return to the one who rejected you, but to return to the self you abandoned before they ever arrived. This is the hidden gift of rejection. It forces you to confront the story you've lived inside, the story where love must be earned, worth must be proven, and wholeness comes from the outside. And in the breaking of that story, something far more beautiful is revealed. Your own voice. The sacred wound teaches you presence. It humbles you. It clears the illusions. It shows you that the very part of you they could not hold is the part of you that most needs your love. And when you offer it, when you choose to cherish what another walked away from, you begin to rewrite the pattern. You begin to walk not as someone trying to be chosen, but as someone who has already chosen themselves. This is not arrogance, it is reverence, a deep bow to your own being. The understanding that rejection was never truly about loss. It was about direction, about redirection, a nudge from life toward a deeper authenticity. Jung believed that the most meaningful transformations come through suffering. Not because suffering is good, but because it is honest. It brings us face to face with what is real. And in that confrontation, the wound becomes a portal. Not a scar to hide, but a symbol of the journey. For the sacred wound says, "Here is where you lost them, and here is where you found yourself." Alchemy, in its ancient language, was not merely about the transformation of metal. It was about the transformation of the soul, lead into gold, shadow into light, suffering into wisdom. And rejection, perhaps the most bitter of all earthly metals, can become gold if we are willing to enter the fire. Carl Jung spoke often of this inner alchemy. He saw it not as mystical abstraction, but as the most profound process of psychological integration. The moment we take the raw material of pain, not avoid it, not repress it, but consciously engage it, we begin to transmute it. We cease being victims of our suffering and become participants in our own rebirth. Rejection is often the starting point of that fire. What once felt like personal failure becomes symbolic. The person who walked away becomes less a character in your life and more a mirror to your unlived truths. They showed you where you still sought love outside yourself, where you still depended on being chosen to feel worthy, where you still feared your own aloneness. And when you stay with that knowledge, when you sit inside the flame rather than run, you are refined, the ego softens, the false stories dissolve, the hunger gives way to stillness, and in that stillness, you meet someone you had forgotten yourself. This is the gold that cannot be taken, the dignity that no rejection can dismantle, the quiet joy of knowing that you are no longer seeking love, you are being it. Jung believed that integration, the alchemy of self, was the highest purpose of the human journey. And every rejection, if embraced consciously, offers a piece of that purpose. A chance to call back the parts of yourself you exiled for love. A chance to become what you once believed only another could bring to you. You no longer need to possess. You no longer ache for what you lost. Because you see now nothing was lost. It was only transformed. And that transformation is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is sacred. It is the quiet power of a soul no longer at war with its own reflection. The final step before true peace. And so we arrive, not at a conclusion, but at a return. The journey that began with the sting of rejection, the ache of longing, and the illusion of incompletion in a place deeper than desire. Self-recognition. Carl Jung's wisdom does not tell us how to avoid pain. It tells us how to walk through it with our eyes open, how to descend into the shadows not as victims, but as seekers. And in this descent, we begin to see what was always waiting beneath the surface of our sorrow, a self untouched by rejection, unshaken by absence, unruined by loss. You are not who they failed to choose. You are not the version of yourself you tried to become to earn their affection. You are not the echo of their silence. You are the source. The one who can sit in the quiet and feel whole. The one who no longer needs to be completed. The one who no longer begs the past for a different ending. This is not the end of desire, but its rebirth. Desire now free from fantasy, now rooted in truth, now flowing not outward to fill a void, but inward to nourish what has already bloomed. The soul does not seek endlessly for love outside itself once it has remembered what it is. The rejected no longer chases. The wounded no longer waits, the unloved no longer doubts. Because now, you see you were always the one you were waiting for. And in that realization, everything changes. Not just how you love, but how you live. Not just what you seek, but why you sought it all. This is not escape. This is embodiment. The embodiment of the truth Jung spent his life unveiling, that every pain, every longing, every rejection is an invitation back home to the self. If these words sear something in you, if they unearthed a memory, a wound, or a glimpse of your truth, let it live. Reflect in the silence. Share your journey in the comments if you feel called. And if you seek more wisdom, more soul, more depth, subscribe not just to this channel, but to your own unfolding. The journey is long, but you are not lost, you are simply remembering.